My name is Penelope Ward. I am 35 years old, and the night my family finally looked at me like I mattered was the same night they had already decided I was not worth showing up for. A few hours before the ceremony, I stared at our family group chat with my thumb hovering over the screen, telling myself not to overthink it, not to read too much into silence, not to want this so badly. I typed, "Tonight is a huge night for me. I am receiving a major award in Washington. I would really love for you all to come." For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time they would understand that what I had built, what I had sacrificed, what I had spent years fighting for was real. Then the first reply came in, fast and sharp enough to cut straight through me. My sister said they did not have time for my stupid, meaningless award. My father answered with a thumbs up, like that settled everything. My mother followed with a message saying they would rather spend the evening together over a warm family dinner. I read all three messages without blinking. No anger, no argument, no begging. I just typed back, "Understood." That one word was the quietest thing I had ever sent them, and somehow it carried the weight of every disappointment that had come before it. What they did not know was that later that night, while they were sitting comfortably at dinner, the country would hear my name, cameras would find my face, and the same family who dismissed my biggest moment would watch it unfold on national television in complete silence. If you have ever been treated like the least important person in your own home, then you already know this story does not really begin at that dinner table. It began years earlier, in a family where I was always expected to achieve quietly and disappear just as quietly after. I grew up in Carmel, Indiana, in a house where everything bright seemed to orbit around my older sister. She was the easy one to celebrate, the kind of girl people noticed the second she walked into a room. She was beautiful in that effortless, camera-ready way, confident, funny when she wanted to be, and always surrounded by attention that seemed to follow her like perfume. My parents loved both of us, at least in the technical sense of the word, but love inside a family does not always arrive in equal proportions, and children know that long before adults are willing to admit it. In our house, Sabrina was the story, and I was usually the useful side note. If a teacher praised my grades, my parents would smile and say they were proud. Then somehow the conversation would drift right back to Sabrina's social life, her plans, her outfits, her latest obsession. If I won something at school, it was treated like a nice little detail. If she got invited somewhere, it became the event of the week. I learned early that there was a difference between being loved and being seen, and I was not the one people really looked at. While other girls my age were hanging posters on their walls, I was teaching myself how to code on an old laptop I bought with babysitting money. I liked the logic of it, the way computers did not care whether you were charming or loud or easy to love. Either something worked or it did not. I built a small scheduling app for high school students before I was old enough to drive, and when it actually started getting downloaded by kids outside my school district, I remember bringing my laptop downstairs with this ridiculous excitement in my chest, thinking maybe this would finally be the thing that made my family pay attention. My mother barely looked up from helping Sabrina get ready for a photo shoot. My father said, "That's nice, honey," without asking a single question. My sister laughed and said, "You really need to stop acting like your little computer projects are changing the world." Everyone chuckled like she had made some harmless joke, and I stood there smiling with my laptop in my hands like an idiot until I finally carried it back upstairs. That kind of thing happened so often it stopped feeling surprising and started feeling normal. I was the one who fixed the Wi-Fi when it broke, the one teachers called responsible, the one neighbors described as mature, the one adults trusted. But none of that came with excitement. It came with convenience. I was appreciated in the way people appreciate a smoke detector. Quietly. Briefly. mostly when something goes wrong. When I got into Stanford with a scholarship that should have changed the energy of the entire house, my mother's first response was to ask whether the move would interfere with Sabrina's brand event that weekend, because she wanted family pictures before I left. At dinner that night, we somehow spent more time talking about Sabrina's sponsored trip to Miami than the fact that I had just earned one of the biggest opportunities of my life. I remember sitting there, cutting into overcooked chicken, listening to them plan her outfits, and feeling something inside me become very still. Not broken, not dramatic, just still. That was the night I began to understand that if I wanted a life that felt like mine, I would have to build it far away from the people who had already decided what role I was allowed to play. So I left Indiana with 2 suitcases, a scholarship, and the kind of ambition that only grows in people who have spent years being underestimated in their own homes. Stanford felt like the first place in my life where I did not have to shrink myself to keep other people comfortable. For the first time, being serious was not something people teased me for. Being obsessed with solving problems was not treated like some strange personality flaw. It was useful there. It was respected. I studied computer engineering and data systems, and I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life, not because anyone was pushing me, but because I finally understood what it felt like to be in a place where effort could actually turn into momentum. While other students went to football games and weekend trips, I spent long nights in computer labs, running simulations, cleaning data, fixing broken models, and teaching myself things that were not even part of my classes yet. I did internships, joined research teams, and learned very quickly that the world outside my family was full of people who did not need me to be charming in order to take me seriously. They just needed me to be good, and I was. After graduation, I moved to Denver and took a job in transportation analytics, which sounds boring until you realize how many lives depend on roads working the way they are supposed to. Most people do not think about traffic systems until something goes wrong, until a highway locks up during an evacuation, until a storm hits faster than expected, until one bad decision turns a backup into a disaster. I thought about those things all the time. A few years later, I helped launch a company focused on predictive emergency routing, and that work eventually became the center of my entire life. We built a platform that could combine live traffic flow, weather conditions, road closure reports, and emergency alerts fast enough to help cities direct people away from danger before panic made everything worse. It was not flashy work. It was not the kind of thing that fit neatly into a cute social media caption. But it mattered. During a major flood season in the Midwest, our system helped county teams redirect drivers away from dangerous highway sections before conditions turned deadly. During a winter pileup risk on a major interstate, our alerts helped reduce congestion in exactly the areas first responders were trying to keep clear. The more the system improved, the more agencies started paying attention. The more people paid attention, the more my life turned into a blur of airport coffee, late-night calls, unanswered texts, and work that followed me into every room I entered. And still, for reasons I probably should have let go of years earlier, I kept trying to share pieces of it with my family. I would call home and explain that our pilot program had just expanded, that a state transportation office wanted a larger deployment, that our team had spent weeks helping emergency planners test routes before storm season. My mother would say that sounded stressful and ask if I was eating enough. My father would make a distracted comment about being proud of me, then shift the conversation to something Sabrina had posted online. My sister, who by then was living in Chicago and treating her life like a permanent lifestyle campaign, would laugh and say things like, "I am sure it is important, but honestly, I have no idea what you are talking about." Then she would launch into a story about a rooftop event, a hotel partnership, a photographer, a wine brand, some new version of a life that looked beautiful in pictures and somehow always seemed more interesting to my parents than anything I had spent months building. I remember one call in particular after a long week when I was exhausted enough to feel honest. I told them our system had helped support an evacuation reroute during severe storm conditions, and before I could even finish explaining what happened, my sister said, "That sounds so intense." I could never care that much about traffic. Everyone laughed softly, including my mother, and I sat there with my phone against my ear, staring out at the lights of downtown Denver, realizing that they were never going to meet me where I actually lived. Not emotionally, not intellectually, not even out of simple curiosity. That was when something shifted in me for good. I stopped calling because I wanted them to understand. After that, I only called out of habit. By the time my work started reaching the federal level, I had already learned not to expect too much from my family. That lesson should have protected me, but hope has a way of surviving in people long after it has stopped making sense. The call came on a gray Tuesday morning while I was in the office reviewing a deployment report with my team. At first, I thought it was another media request or maybe a scheduling issue, but the moment I heard the voice on the other end introduce herself from Washington, everything around me seemed to go quiet. She told me I had been selected to receive the National Medal of Technology and Innovation for my work in public safety systems, for helping build technology that gave emergency teams and ordinary drivers better odds in moments when every second mattered. For a few seconds, I honestly could not speak. I just stood there with one hand pressed against the conference table, listening as she explained the ceremony details, the travel schedule, the protocol, the official notice that would be sent over by email. When I finally hung up, my team knew from my face that something huge had happened. The room exploded before I even got the words out. People were hugging me, shouting, crying, pounding on the table, asking if I was serious. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, I felt this strange ache rising in my chest because the first people I wanted to tell were the same people who had spent most of my life acting like my work was background noise. Still, I told myself this was different. This was not a school project, or a scholarship, or another thing they could politely ignore while waiting for my sister to do something louder. This was the White House. This was the kind of honor even people outside my field understood. So that afternoon, after the official email came through, and I had read it 3 times just to make sure I was not imagining any of it, I opened the family group chat and typed out a message more carefully than I should have. I wrote that I had just received life-changing news, that I was being honored in Washington, that the ceremony would be that week, and that it would mean a lot to me if they came. I added the time, the city, and even the note that it would be covered by national media in case attending felt inconvenient. Then I stared at the screen and waited. I did not have to wait long. Sabrina answered first, almost immediately, like she had been holding her response ready before she even finished reading. She wrote that they did not have time for my stupid, meaningless award. The wording was so sharp and so casual at the same time that for a second I thought I had read it wrong. Then my father reacted to her message with a thumbs up. No phone call. No question. No, are you serious? Just a thumbs up, like he was approving dinner plans. A few seconds later, my mother sent the final message. She said they would rather spend the evening together having a warm family dinner. I looked at the 3 responses lined up on my screen and felt the last little piece of confusion inside me die. It was not that they did not understand how important this was. It was that understanding had never been the issue. They simply did not value the things that mattered to me unless someone else told them they should. And in that moment, before the cameras, before the medal, before the headlines and apology calls and all the things that came later, I saw my family more clearly than I ever had in my life. I typed one word back. Understood. Then I locked my phone, set it face down on my desk, and went back to work with a calm, so complete it almost scared me. Because when disappointment stops hurting, That usually means something in you has already moved on. Washington did not feel real to me at first. Even after the car passed the gates, even after I went through security, even after I stood in a room full of people whose work had changed industries, saved lives, and shaped the country in ways most Americans would never fully see, some part of me still felt like the girl from Indiana carrying an old laptop up the stairs because nobody downstairs cared enough to look. The White House staff moved with that polished calm that made everything feel both historic and strangely efficient. There were rehearsals, timing notes, handshakes, photographers, seating charts, and the kind of quiet formality that makes you sit a little straighter without even realizing it. I wore a navy dress my assistant had practically forced me to buy because she said I needed to stop dressing like I was headed into a data review meeting. I remember smoothing the fabric over my knees while I waited and thinking, of all the nights for my family to finally be absent, of course it would be this one. My team had come. A few agency officials I had worked with were there too. People who actually understood what this moment meant smiled at me with genuine warmth. But there was still an empty space in the back of my mind where my family should have been. Not because they deserved to be there, but because some wounds do not stop aching just because you know better. When my name was finally called, everything seemed to sharpen at once. I walked forward, hearing the sound of applause around me, but it was distant, almost underwater, compared to the pounding of my own heart. Then the president said my name clearly, confidently, and followed it with a description of the work I had spent years pouring myself into. He spoke about emergency response, about technology that helped communities act faster when roads became dangerous, and minutes could mean the difference between escape and tragedy. He said my work had helped strengthen public safety in moments of chaos, and hearing the value of my life's work stated out loud in that room, in that building, in front of those cameras, did something to me I still do not fully have words for. The metal rested heavier on my shoulders than I expected. Not physically, but emotionally. It felt like the weight of every ignored achievement, every lonely night, every small humiliation, every time I had been told in ways large and small that what I cared about was too technical, too serious, too invisible to matter. And yet there it was, impossible to dismiss now, shining under White House lights. Somewhere back in Indiana, while all of this was happening, my family was at dinner exactly where they had said they would be. My mother had chosen one of those upscale places she liked because the lighting was flattering and the wine list made her feel worldly. My father was probably relaxed for once, enjoying the comfort of a familiar table. My sister, no doubt, was talking with her hands, telling some long story about an event in Chicago or a campaign she thought would put her on another level. The kind of conversation they always made room for. The kind of life they always understood. Then, one of the televisions above the bar switched over to a national news cut in from Washington. A local station back in Indiana picked up the feed because a woman from Carmel was being honored at the White House that night. The anchor introduced me as an Indiana native whose technology had helped improve emergency routing and public safety response across multiple states. Then the screen filled with my face. I did not see their reactions in real time, of course, but I heard about them later from more than one source, which made me believe every detail. Sabrina went silent in the middle of a sentence. My mother slowly lowered her wine glass and stared up at the television like she had stopped understanding the room. My father, the man who had answered my invitation with a thumbs up to my sister's cruelty, apparently said absolutely nothing. And then the president appeared beside me on the screen and placed the medal around my neck, while the chyron beneath us identified me by name. The same name they had brushed aside just hours earlier. The same achievement they had called stupid and meaningless. People in the restaurant started looking from the television to their table and back again. Someone nearby recognized my last name and asked if they were related to me. Another person said they had just heard that my technology had helped emergency agencies during severe weather events and highway incidents. A waiter paused. A couple at the next table turned fully in their seats. There was nowhere for my family to hide from the truth of that moment. They had chosen to miss the biggest night of my life, and now strangers were witnessing their shock before they could even arrange their faces into something less embarrassing. After the ceremony ended, I stepped away from the crowd for a few quiet minutes and looked down at my phone. It was already vibrating with the beginning of what I knew was coming. But before I opened any of it, I went to the family group chat and sent a single message. Thank you for giving me space tonight. The ceremony was beautiful. Then I attached a photo of myself standing beneath the lights with the medal visible against my dress and sent it without another word. I did not need to shame them. Reality had done that for me more completely than anger ever could. Then I locked my phone, slipped it back into my bag, and walked into the reception with a strange new feeling settling over me. It was not triumph exactly. It was not revenge in the dramatic way people imagine it. It was something quieter and better than that. It was the feeling of no longer needing people to understand your worth after the world has already made it undeniable. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone looked like it had survived some kind of electrical storm. Missed calls, voicemails, text alerts, email notifications, messages from numbers I had not seen in years, all stacked on top of each other until my screen almost did not look like mine anymore. For a few quiet seconds, I just stared at it from the hotel bed with the curtains half open and the Washington sunlight cutting across the room. I knew exactly where most of it was coming from. What I did not know yet was how fast the shock had spread. My family group chat had gone from cold dismissal to total chaos overnight. My mother had sent a string of messages asking why I had not told them it was that important, which would have been laughable if it had not been so insulting. My father had written that they were proud of me, and that everything had happened so fast. Sabrina had sent 4 separate messages between midnight and 3 in the morning, each one sounding more desperate than the last. The first said she had not understood what kind of award it was. The second said she had been in complete shock at the restaurant. The third said people had started recognizing our family name immediately and asking questions. The fourth was just one sentence that somehow managed to sound both hysterical and self-pitying at the same time. Penelope, please call me. This has turned into a disaster. I sat there reading that line twice because it told me more than any apology could have. Not I hurt you. Not I was cruel. Not I cannot believe I missed your biggest night. A disaster. Meaning, the worst part, in her mind, was not what she had done to me. It was what had happened to her because other people saw it. That realization made it easier to put the phone down and get ready slowly. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs for coffee before I answered a single message. Somewhere between the first sip and the second, the headlines started finding me. Local Indianapolis stations had run the story all over their morning broadcasts. Hometown engineer honored at White House. Indiana woman recognized for life-saving public safety technology. Photos of me with the medal were everywhere. Former teachers had posted about me. People from Stanford had reshared the clip. Transportation officials and emergency planners I had worked with were tagging the company and congratulating my team. The story had escaped the limits of my field and become something broader, something ordinary people could understand. A woman from Indiana had built technology that helped protect lives in moments of danger, and the president had honored her for it. That was simple enough for anyone to respect. Unfortunately for my sister, people online are very good at connecting dots when humiliation is involved. Sabrina had spent years building a life around visibility. She posted constantly, curated every angle, shared every dinner, every event, every gift basket, every polished fragment of a life designed to make strangers envy her. But visibility is only flattering when the spotlight lands where you want it to. Sometime that morning, one of the women who had been in the restaurant the night before posted about the moment my family saw me on television. She did not even name them at first. She just wrote about sitting near a table that went dead silent after dismissing a family member's award, only to realize that same family member was at the White House receiving a medal from the president. It spread faster than it should have, probably because people love stories that punish arrogance without any help from fiction. Then someone else recognized my sister from her public account. Then another person found an old clip of Sabrina joking on a panel that people who turn their achievements into their whole personality are exhausting and insecure. It was not about me directly, but beside the news coverage and the restaurant story, it looked ugly enough to do damage. By noon, one of her brand partners had announced a pause in their campaign with her. By that afternoon, an event she had been promoting in Chicago quietly removed her from its guest lineup. Her manager stopped returning calls right away, which in her world was the equivalent of hearing a fire alarm. The comments under her latest posts became brutal. Some people called her shallow. Some called her jealous. Some said the cruelest thing was not that she had insulted me, but that she had insulted work that actually helped save lives. For once, the internet was not exaggerating. It had simply seen her clearly. My parents were not handling it any better. People they knew had already started calling. Church friends, neighbors, people from my father's business circle, women my mother lunched with and tried to impress, all of them suddenly full of questions. Why were they not in Washington? Why had they missed it? Had they known? Were they close with me now? It was amazing how quickly they went from indifference to panic once the outside world started measuring them against the daughter they had failed to value. Around lunchtime, I finally answered my mother's call. She burst into tears within the first 30 seconds and kept saying they had no idea, that they never imagined it would be shown everywhere, that the whole thing had happened so unexpectedly. I let her talk until she ran out of excuses and had to sit in the silence she had earned. Then I asked her one simple question. What part did you not understand? The part where I said it was the biggest night of my life, or the part where I asked you to come? She had no real answer to that. My father got on the line and tried to sound steady, tried to make it about misunderstanding and timing, but even he could not hide the embarrassment in his voice. He said they were proud of me. He said they wanted to make it right. I told him something I had never said out loud before. I am not upset that you made a choice. I am upset that you made the same choice over and over for years, and this is just the first time other people happen to be watching. He did not respond for several seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. Then my sister called. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Sabrina was crying hard enough that I could barely understand her at first. She said brands were backing away. She said people were destroying her online. She said she was sorry, that she had been stupid, that she had no idea this would turn into something so huge. Again, there it was. Not sorrow first, consequences first. I listened until she ran out of breath, and then I told her the truth as calmly as I could. This did not become huge overnight. It was always huge. You just decided it was meaningless because it mattered to me instead of you. She started crying harder after that. The kind of crying people do when they realize their own words are going to follow them longer than they expected. I did not comfort her. I did not attack her either. I just let the silence sit there until she had to feel it. Over the next 2 weeks, things kept unraveling for her in slow, ugly steps. Another partnership stalled. The Chicago event circuit that used to invite her everywhere suddenly felt less welcoming. Her manager advised her to step back from public appearances until the backlash cooled. Without the same steady income, the apartment she had stretched herself to afford started becoming impossible to justify. Eventually, she gave up the lease and moved back in with our parents, which was the kind of fall from grace she would have mocked in somebody else 6 months earlier. People later tried to frame all of it as my revenge, but that was never true. I did not leak anything. I did not call anyone. I did not have to. The punishment was built into the moment itself. She publicly revealed exactly what kind of person she was, and the world made its own judgment. That was the part she never saw coming. She thought influence meant control. She thought attention could always be managed. She had no idea how fast the spotlight could turn when it finally landed on something real. And me, the sister she had spent years treating like background noise, had become the one thing nobody in the family could look away from anymore. 3 weeks after the ceremony, Sabrina came to see me in Denver. She looked nothing like the woman who had mocked me so easily. No designer outfit, no polished smile, no confidence. Just red eyes, trembling hands, and a voice that kept breaking every time she tried to say my name. She told me everything had fallen apart. More brand deals were gone. Her management company had dropped her. Event invitations had disappeared. She had lost her apartment in Chicago and moved back in with our parents in Indiana. She kept saying she had lost everything because of one stupid sentence. But the truth was, it was never just one sentence. That sentence only revealed the kind of person she had been choosing to become for years. For the first time in her life, people saw past the image and into the emptiness underneath it. She admitted she had always felt threatened by me because I had something she could never fake. I had substance. I had discipline. I had built something real. I told her I heard her apology, but being sorry after losing everything was not the same as having good character. I did not yell. I did not comfort her either. I just let her sit with the truth she had spent years avoiding. 2 days later, my parents came too. My mother cried before she even sat down. My father looked like a man who had finally understood how many years he had wasted praising what was easy and ignoring what was real. They admitted they had always chosen what looked impressive on the outside. My mother said she loved what was easy to celebrate. My father admitted he had tuned me out because my world made him feel ignorant, and instead of learning, he chose comfort. They asked if we could start over. I told them I did not hate them, but I was no longer willing to pretend the past had been a misunderstanding. They had shown me, again and again, exactly where I stood. Just because they were ready to value me now did not mean they were entitled to immediate access to the life I built without them. Around that same time, I accepted an offer to become Chief Technology Officer at a national infrastructure and emergency systems company in Austin. It was the biggest opportunity of my life, with a larger team, a national mission, and the kind of future I had once dreamed about alone in silence. I moved into a new home, and in my office I hung 3 things on the wall: my Stanford degree, a photo of my team, and the medal from the White House. Not because I needed proof for anyone else, but because I wanted to remember what becomes possible when you stop asking the wrong people to see your worth. As for my sister, the price she paid was far heavier than embarrassment. The internet moved on, but her industry did not. Her name was now attached to the moment she mocked work that had helped save lives. Serious brands would not touch her. Her apology videos failed. Her rebrand attempts failed. Even our parents eventually stopped trying to bankroll her comeback. In the end, she took a part-time job at a home decor store outside Indianapolis, helping strangers furnish houses while living back in the bedroom she thought she had outgrown years ago. That was the real punishment. Not just losing money or status, but losing the illusion she had built her whole identity on. In the end, my revenge was never destroying her. It was refusing to stay small so she could keep feeling big. If my story means anything, it is this: the people closest to you can overlook you, dismiss you, and fail to understand you for years. But their blindness does not define your value. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep building, keep rising, and keep going until the truth of who you are becomes too undeniable for anyone to ignore. And when that day comes, do not waste it begging for late love from people who only noticed you after the applause. Choose your future, protect your peace, and never again let someone else decide how much you are worth. At Revenge Argon, our team works hard to create meaningful and engaging stories that leave a lasting impact. We are committed to making it clear that these are fictional stories, created to share educational lessons, emotional insights, and valuable life messages with our audience. The villain in this story was not just cruel, but blinded by jealousy, pride, and shallow judgment. She dismissed something truly meaningful because she could not recognize value beyond attention and appearance. If you were in Penelope's place, how would you deal with a person like that? And would you ever give her a second chance?